and Utiya. In Maya, Iut means "and then it happened," and Uti means "since it happened." The words that Thompson had viewed as mere dates were in fact telling a story. And then it happened, on the day 1 Kib 14 Kankin, that she was adorned in marriage, Lady Khatun Ahau, Lady of Naman. And after 10 days, 11 months, 1 year and 1 score of years, then it happened on the day 4 Kimi 14 Wo that their daughter was born, the royal Sun Lady. The implications were revolutionary. Epigraphers had been searching for a single sign for each syllabic sound. But if U was represented by more than one sign, then other syllables might be as well.
One of the things about Maya writing which makes it so complicated is their love of substitutions. One sound can have 13, 14, 15 different versions. They hated repeating themselves and loved showing new things. And the recognition of those substitution patterns was what began to break down the complexity of Maya writing into something which was a manageable, comprehensible system.
Each time a Maya scribe wrote a given word or phrase, he could choose from a variety of signs and combine them in new ways. A sign could be written abstractly, or as the head of a human, animal, or god. One sign could be slipped inside another, or partly overlapped. Two signs could join, merging their attributes. Glyphs even included figures of monsters and gods.
The art of the system is the genius within which they combine these different possibilities. The graphic component of Maya writing is absolutely overwhelming.
There was an artistry and a playfulness that was as much a part of the system as the recording of language. So visually it was complicated, but once you organized that visual material into the system that existed, it made perfect sense, and you could predict things. You could really crack the code that way.
An image of the ancient Maya was suddenly coming to life, gleaned from their own words. Some glyphs simply described personal possessions. Utupa, Utup, his ear ornament. Ubaki, Ubak, his bone. Ulak, his plate. Ukib, his drinking vessel.
They're describing particularly important objects belonging to the royal court. They're probably gifts, they're received, they're given. They're part of a social process that helps to bond these societies together.
It's like having a time machine to be able to read these texts. And to me, it's a rare privilege to be able to read them out loud in the language in which they were written. Maybe sometimes I'm the first person to actually say them out loud in 1,000 years.
Soon, more esoteric ideas emerged in the writing. There were glyphs describing frightening otherworldly beings.
These glyphs were appearing with scenes of these fantastic animals and creatures and spooky-looking walking skeletons. And this was a different kind of thing from what we were used to reading about in Maya glyphs. You know, they weren't talking about monuments, they weren't talking about warfare. They were talking about kind of the inner souls of people.
As the readings poured out, a more complex view of the Maya began to emerge.
Instead of these peaceful stargazing astronomer priests, the Maya were shown to be like any other civilization with a great deal of conflict. One of their great claims to fame was how many captives they had taken as offerings to their gods and ancestors. They would also periodically engage in the most precious offering of all, which was in offering their own blood.
The importance of self-sacrifice can be seen in this ceremony. A royal lady conjures a vision of a serpent with an offering of her own blood. She has perforated her tongue with a stingray spine to draw a rope embedded with thorns through the incision. In front of her, slips of paper soaked in her own blood burn in a ceramic bowl. Out of the rising smoke forms the vision of a serpent. From its mouth emerges the figure of an ancestor. The upper text describes the ceremony. On March 28, 755, a vision was conjured of the serpent Yash no Chan, the animal spirit of the god Kawil, and then a vision was conjured of the ancestor Yash Chawim. The glyph for conjure shows a hand grasping a fish.
It's this idea of grabbing something that's elusive, reaching into another realm in a way, or even into the underworld, and wrenching something out of that and bringing it into your own world. That is conjuring.
From glyphs and art, the psyche of the ancient Maya was emerging.
We now saw the Maya people as a whole. So you could look at a piece of Maya art and the inscriptions on the tops of the vases and understand what the heck these people were doing.
One myth, painted repeatedly on Maya vases, echoes a surviving 16th century manuscript, the Popol Vuh. It tells the saga of twin brothers summoned to the underworld.
They play a ball game against the lords of the underworld in which they are finally defeated, and they are sacrificed. The head of the main brother there is cut off and hung up in a tree. And a young lady comes by who is the daughter of one of the lords of the underworld. She talks to the head and it spits into her hand. Naturally, she becomes pregnant.
Banished from the underworld, she eventually gives birth to a second set of twins. They become skilled warriors and return to the underworld to fight its lords. After a series of clever tricks, they resurrect the body of their father, the maize god, and bring food back to their people. Then they rise up to become the sun and moon.
This is the single most important myth that we have from the entire New World, probably the most important piece of literature ever produced in the Western Hemisphere.
The decipherment was not only illuminating the inner world of the Maya, but also casting new light on the power struggles tearing apart their great city-states. It became clear that from the 3rd to 9th centuries, the Maya world was dominated by warring superpowers.
We began to see blood everywhere in the iconography and in the hieroglyphs. They were not a peaceful people, but involved with absolutely bloody sacrifice.
In this sculpture, a captive has been scalped, disemboweled, and crippled. Wood is tied to his back to set him on fire.
There were well-defined groups that were really at each other's throats, battling each other and causing havoc on the landscape.
The glyphs reveal the mayhem. Chuk, to capture. Hoob, to take down a city. Pool, to burn. Chak, to decapitate. One scribe grimly wrote, "The skulls piled up and the blood pooled." On the last dated monument of Copan, the great king Yash Pasa hands his scepter to his successor, signaling the dawn of a new dynasty. But this new reign never began. The scribe telling its story fled, leaving the monument unfinished. The kingdom could no longer sustain either rulers or artists. As political upheaval engulfed the region, the great cities of the southern lowlands finally collapsed.